What's up, everyone? Thank you so much for tuning in to the Revelers Rule podcast, where we celebrate life loudly and lively. And we are here today with a very special guest, my friend Vlada Stojanov of Psalm Cigars, who I had the pleasure of meeting at TPE in Vegas back in January. And we had a really great time, really great conversation. If you haven't seen my interview with Vlada while I was at Vegas, definitely go check that out, where he told me all about his cigars and everything like that, and his experience as a sommelier and how that helped with his blends. But Vlada's definitely an awesome guy to talk to, and we're gonna have a great conversation today. Vlada, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks, buddy. Thanks for having me on. Good to see you
No,
again, even over Zoom.
no, it's great to see you again too, man. It's been a bit, but what's been going on with you lately?
Couple exciting things. So you saw the 3D printed stuff at the show.
Hmm.
Um, I've I am 99% sure I got a lock on the humidor design that I might have mentioned to you back
Uh,
then.
you did mention it, yes.
Yeah, the vault. It's a work in progress title, but I might call it the cellar or
The
something. We'll
vault,
figure
the
it out.
vault sounds pretty cool, honestly.
It does. I just want to. Yeah, it does actually. I don't know. I don't. It's a working title right now.
Hmm.
Um, we've played around with it, adjusted the doors, the hinges, stuff like that, so that it looks cool.
Awesome.
And then working on the rest of the line and updating it to 3D printing, to a couple of different 3D printing designs. So it's fun that you can iterate and reiterate as many times as you can, and you can do it quickly. Um, I can go from ADHD driven idea to essentially a prototype 24 hours later. So that's pretty
That's where
cool.
that's where some of the best ideas come from, is those moments when you are like bouncing from one idea to the next. Because like I'm an easily distracted guy, and I'll be thinking of something one minute and then the next. I'm like Doug from Up, or just squirrel. I'm thinking of something else immediately when I'm in the middle of a different thought. So, but that's when some of those light bulb moments can kind of kick in. But truly, I think you were no, yeah, you were the first person I think I've ever met that has employed 3D printing to develop their boxes and everything like that. I haven't seen anybody else do that. So far
Hmm.
as I know, you're the only person that I've ever heard of doing that.
I don't know if anybody's doing it on a larger scale or what they're planning. I really don't know. So I'm gonna claim I'm the second person to ever do it because that way I won't get fact checked.
Yeah, and that
Um,
way, if you do
yeah,
find out you're the first, then it's okay.
exactly. But yeah, I'm really looking into it for a couple of reasons, and I think we touched upon it. One is essentially to protect the supply chain. Right, this way I'm in control, and as long as I have filament and there's power, I can make boxes. The other thing is, which again going back to the hospitality background, is I really do want to customize the experience for people.
Hmm.
So let's say you're a small shop that doesn't really have a lot of space, and shelf space is always at a premium.
Yeah.
Um, the Blanc box can incorporate both Toro and Robusto in a single box. Like, is it groundbreaking? Um, no, I'm sure other people have done something similar, with
Hmm.
wood and things like that. But
Yeah.
is it cool that you can do that? Is it you can do it for the other sizes as well, or at least that's going to be the idea, having a modular setup that I can adjust to store specifications, at least for um, display purposes. And then the
Well,
regular stuff is all going to be consistently.
Well, that's I think the really remarkable thing about, I mean, 3D printing is obviously a revolutionary thing to begin with, because you can whatever specs you need, you can basically create whatever you want as long as you have the filament and all the materials you need. And like you said, if you as long as you have somewhere to plug in and you have enough filament to produce, you could do it. I mean, almost essentially on the go, like when you're traveling and you're going to different places, you can create those boxes and displays, so that way it kind of takes what do you how do I I don't have the words. It's still early in the morning for me. But where, as opposed to having to go through a supplier or somebody that you need to source your materials through, obviously you need to get, the filament and stuff from somewhere, but you don't have to worry about like I got to call my guy because I'm low on boxes, I'm low on promotional or display materials. Like, well, let me just whip up a box real quick,
Yep.
while I'm here, so that way I have a place to put the cigars and stuff like that. And it's really cool because it is just like an a one-stop setup shop where you can advertise yourself and you can show people what you're working with without having to, make any calls or try to, dig through a supply box or anything like that. So I think that's pretty cool.
I agree with you. It was fun doing TP. We only made about 50 of those sampler boxes
Mm-hmm.
and blew through them in essentially the first day. I didn't expect that, but that was the talk of the show, so it was fun to see it.
Yeah.
Um, and then we just kept printing more and more, and we got a different color filament. So the initial boxes were all red. The second day or the day after first day afternoon, it was blue, and then we did the desert tan ones, and we just played around with different colors. It also helped. Like I've got a bunch of single spool filaments, mostly to see
Mm-hmm.
how the actual boxes look, because what's on the monitor versus what you get in person versus what is printed might not always align 100%.
Yeah.
And I am a visual guy where I'm like, I need to see this, I need to feel the texture, it needs to be real. You can render whatever, but when you touch it, like it's got to feel the right way. Also added some small adjustments, mostly because I try to look at it. I try to A lot of products are customer driven,
Mm-hmm.
right? They're made with the customer in mind. I don't know if a lot of products are made with the customer's interest in mind, looking at through the eyes as a customer, someone who's going to be the person using that product. And I try to do it that way.
Yeah.
So even small little adjustments, like even if you look back at the pictures of the box, you can see that and again, these are all minute details that probably nobody cares about, but if you take a look at it for more than 3 seconds, you'll be like, wow, they actually did think about these things.
Yeah.
So in most shops, your boxes are going to be at an angle. So I looked at it on the front where it's the SOM and what the size is. I essentially realized that the lip of the shelf is going to cover it. So we
Mm-hmm.
elevated it and it made the SOM bigger. But then the divider that I mentioned, the little block that um, separates or uses the same modular box
Mm-hmm.
design, but the
Yeah.
way you can put the Robusto and Toro in there,
Yeah.
I added some on there. And then the idea is, one day if we have a really good relationship with the shop, like I could put the shop's name on there. That way, when your customer so retailers are ultimately my customers, right? I don't sell
Mm-hmm.
direct to consumers. And then we have fans and people who like the brand. But ultimately, the shop looks at it and be like, okay, this makes sense. And then further down the chain, right, the person actually buying the cigar can look at it and be like, oh yeah, cool. I can see that this is a SOM. I can have the blend explanation right in front of me. I can see that, someone thought about all these little moments within my journey from the moment I actually see it to the moment I picked it up to the moment I,
Mm-hmm.
scanned it. And I try to make it as frictionless as possible.
Well, I really like that just because people obviously will always have questions about a brand, or at least those who are the more inquisitive. Because, for me, I like to know, as a cigar consumer, I like to know as much as I can about the brand that I'm smoking. Just because I like it. I mean, I like a good story. I like a good story about anything, and anyone who is producing cigars usually has a pretty interesting story. Um, and having those details and having those little tidbits of information really kind of helps enrich, your purchase, enrich your your experience with the cigar and stuff like that. Because it, it it really is remarkable how packaging and display can make all the difference. Because I've seen some pretty basic, not very interesting displays when it comes to cigar brands, and that's not to knock what they do, because every brand is different. But I love seeing like really beautiful artwork and design and stuff that's had thought go into it. And kind of like what you were saying, you have the customer in mind when you make these designs, and you like customer input. You want to make sure the customer's happy with what they're looking at, not just what they're smoking. Obviously, the smoking experience is at the center of all of it, but all those other things completely round out the experience, and it makes it fun. It makes it interesting. It makes it colorful, and that was one of the things that also drew me to like your cigars, the bands, the boxes and stuff like that. The colors you use, I don't think I've seen colors like that used in other brands, like, because it just the way you use the red, like I'm smoking the BDX Blanc right now. I love the color of the band and the gold embossing. It's very attractive, and it kind of makes your eyes go to the cigar, and then you really want to try it and all of that stuff. And that all lines up, that all links up because you can see cigars anywhere. And yeah, if you want to smoke a cigar, you smoke it. But there have been times I've seen like this really cool looking band, and I'm like, I want to try that cigar just because of how cool the band looks. And for all I know, the cigar might be terrible, but it drew me to a purchase. I purchased a cigar because there was really good artistic work going into it. But
It got you once at least, right?
it got you once at least, exactly. So, but I want to say this, and I'm not at the risk of sounding too corny with puns and stuff like that, not to blow smoke up your ass, but honestly, your cigars were among the more unique cigars that I tried at TPE, and that like I told you, I gave a cigar to my dad. He really enjoyed it. And I can tell just by the flavor and the complexity of the different blends you gave me that your experience as a sommelier and your experience in hospitality definitely had a huge impact on how you created these cigars. So tell me a little bit about your background. We'll go into the hospitality stuff in a bit, but like your experience as a sommelier, how that really factored into how you create your blends.
So thank you, first of all, for the very kind words.
Mm-hmm.
The second part is how it informs the blends. I've it's tasting experience, right? And
Mm-hmm.
and I like to compare the blending side of cigars to barrel tasting because it's funny. Um, it's not a science. It's experience driven. Yes, some combinations will work, you know that, but what you're essentially saying is you're trying this and saying, okay, this potential is going to taste is going to do this 3, 4, 5, 6 year, 2 years from now.
Mm-hmm.
You're trying to imagine it in the future, assuming everything goes well. So, if you have a lot of potential, but you decide to take a gap year and then, just have fun for a little while, that's great. But are you going to hit your potential right off the bat, or is it going to be delayed a little bit? Like what happens?
Yeah.
Do we need to account for that, right? Do we need to, instead of releasing it at 6 months, does it need to release at 9? Does it need to release at 12?
Mm-hmm.
Um, it could be a late bloomer. So really it's fun to do it, and it's fun to do the blends because I'll blend them at the factories, and I did blend everything in my
Yeah.
portfolio, aside from the Premier Crew, which was made by Hendrik Kellner Jr. for me. So I just picked between the two blends. And that was a very fun experience because the first blend that we made, and they're very, very similar. The first blend that was made was just ready right off the bat. Like just rolled, ready, firing on all cylinders, rolled, half an hour previously or
Yeah.
earlier. But the second one it was disjointed. Like there were just protrusions here and there when you
Mm-hmm.
tasted it, but it had so much potential. And Hendrik, to his credit, he said, it's your choice, it's your blend. I'm not gonna impact it. And I smoked the second one, and rather than do the regular tastings where you go for the first inch and recreate blah blah blah, I was like, no, I'm gonna smoke it start to finish. I want to make sure I have the full experience.
Yeah.
And I did, and I'm like, you know what? I think I like this. The first one is ready, but I think I like the second one, and I
Yeah.
think that's gonna do like better long term with 50 plus years worth of tobacco. Um, And he's like, yeah, that's got the better potential. So that's probably the most requested cigar because again, I don't know if it because it was a limited edition or because it was 50 plus years worth of aged tobacco, but that was like just something really, really unique. And as far as the hospitality side of it, I mean, and the Somm, right? I've been tasting stuff professionally, right? Since don't carbon date me at this point, but since 2009. So between wine, cigars, all kinds of things, I just I'm thirsty for knowledge. So I have a beer certification. I have a bourbon steward certification. I've done like water training, which is probably one of the most pretentious things I've ever done in my life. Um, but again, like very, very interested in the tactile sensations, how we perceive flavor. I've read a bunch of books, and when I say books, I don't mean, um, you know, this is what you should drink with whatever. No, I mean books written by actual neuroscientists, people who have done studies, research, how do we perceive flavors? Because I mean, I don't want to say we don't know, but we have a limited understanding. Like we don't truly understand everything around it. And I think
Mhm.
that probably the most interesting part was learning that our brain essentially makes stuff up. Like it
Oh yeah.
legitimately makes stuff up as we're
Oh my
tasting. So
gosh. Like I'm amazed at how like the different perceptions of flavor and taste with like I'll smoke a cigar and I'll get notes of whatever, you know. And I've been kind of developing my palate really uh only for like the past 6 years because prior to I would say 2018 when I smoked cigars, I just smoked them to smoke them. I wasn't really paying attention to what was, you know, coming up and what I was experiencing. I just liked smoking cigars, and it wasn't until I started meeting people who were, you know, manufacturers of boutique brands, smaller brands and stuff like that. That's when I really started paying attention, especially when I started doing cigar media because like I better know what the fuck I'm talking about because otherwise, you know, people are just going to be like, oh, he's just sitting there smoking a cigar, recording himself. That seems a little vain, you know. He just wants to look cool in front of a camera, which, yeah, I do, but I also want to know what I'm talking about. But
it helps.
what's that?
It helps. It helps.
It does help. It kind of helps your credibility just a little bit. But yeah, I remember I was having a conversation with another cigar, you know, media person, and we were just messaging over Instagram, and we were smoking the same cigar, and they were telling me they got notes of stuff. I'm like, where the hell did you get that? Like, I said that's crazy. I didn't get any of that. And she was like, ah, you know what? Sometimes people get just different stuff nobody else gets, and it's all different and relative to the person's palate because you know I've known people who have such a refined palate, not necessarily regarding cigars, but just in general when it comes, especially when it comes to food. I've known people who had such a good palate they could taste something store bought, let's just say a jar of like preserves or jelly or something like that. They taste it and they reverse engineer it in their brain and they make it themselves. And I'm like, that's bonkers to me because I can't imagine doing that. Because yeah, I'll taste certain things and I'll get like different nuances and whatnot. But I was like, for the most part, I'm like, I couldn't make that. I'd have to go to like friggin' Pinterest or Google it or something to see if I could actually make it. But I can't do that just based on taste. And but you're right though, because like there are times I've gotten flavors that I'm like, where the hell did that come from? And I tell somebody else like that's nuts. I didn't taste that at all. And I'm like, my brain apparently interpreted that way. Apparently that's what I got from it. Because there have been cigars that I've smoked that were like almost savory in their flavor profile, like salty, peppery, and different stuff like that. Those are some of the strangest cigars I've ever smoked, but they were also a hell of an experience. And it wasn't anything I'll ever forget. And then, you know, sadly, a lot of those cigars I haven't smoked since just because they're hard to find. But yeah, it is weird what the brain will make up. But
All of it. And it's a muscle, right? Like you just
mhm,
exercise it, and a lot of the what you pick up is going to be experience driven, meaning it's going to be based on what you experience throughout
mhm,
life, how adventurous of an eater you are, because that's probably the easiest way to develop your palate.
right.
Um, right. If you eat, chicken breast and a baked potato, your Rolodex of flavors that you have an easy access to. I mean, yeah, you've probably had uh, sumac, for example, if that's like your day to day, but you've probably had sumac maybe once back in 2017. And yeah, that file exists, but it's probably, in a box labeled kitchen stuff, locked in the attic. So you're gonna have a
Yeah.
harder time picking that up versus say someone else who's a lot more adventurous when it comes to eating and food in general. And it's just the way you interpret it. The language also plays a big part. The language explanations or the words rather that we use in English versus say Spanish versus Japanese are going to be different, and your experiences are going to be different. And in wine, this is like pretty apparent, especially from a texture standpoint when you're explaining it.
Hmm.
So with cigars, it's really interesting and it's very rewarding. If you once you graduate from, okay, I'm going to get a little technical. Once you graduate from your retrohaling, which is essentially you're pushing the smoke through the back of your throat, through your nose.
I got a funny
Yeah,
story
go
about
ahead.
that when you're done. When you're
No,
done.
no, go ahead, go ahead. I
Well,
guess we can segue into it.
okay, real quick detour. And there are people who have heard this story before. Um, I learned how to retrohale when I was just a child because I was an asthmatic and I had to take, it was childhood asthma, so I outgrew it. But, um, I had an inhaler like so many other kids that I knew, and I don't know how I figured it out. To this day, I still don't know how. I, because I was just a dumb kid, I would like, when I didn't even need it, I would take a puff of my inhaler, hold it in my mouth, and blow it out like I was smoking. And then one day somehow I figured out how to blow it through my nose. Now it was a little harsh, but I thought it was the coolest thing. What's odd about that is like I started smoking when I was 19, started smoking cigars when I was 19, and it was kind of just a little bit of a every now and then thing. But when I started smoking cigars more consistently, and it was like in 2018, almost 15 years after I started smoking cigars, that I was encouraged to try retrohaling. Because I remember when I smoked my first cigar, I tried retrohaling and it was a disaster. And I started hacking and coughing. And my dad told me, don't do that. And I'm like, okay, I won't ever do that again. And then like 2018, a cigar broker I knew at the time where we were hanging out, and he's like, you tried retrohaling? And I'm like, and I didn't know the term. I didn't know that's what you called it. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, through your nose. I'm like, oh, dude, I tried that and it was bad. And he's like, you need to start doing it. And I did. And I got, it got easier to do and I got better at it. And I do it all the time now because that's one of the best ways to open up the flavor profile of what you're smoking. And it's a game changer once you figure it out.
Yep, you're 100% right. I love how that was a really good throwback going back to childhood and then bringing it back up. That's great. But you're right. With retrohaling, what you really want to do is, I'm assuming why it was harsh was go again. If I was next to you, these are the two things that I would guess. One is you probably, especially if this is your amongst your first cigars, like getting the rhythm down where you don't overheat the cigar. That's probably like the ceiling is not high. You just got to be patient. And in a world where, you know, everything's got to be right then and now, and oh, this is a Lonsdale, like let me use a quad torch on it. In fact, like, you know what? Let me use a six torch lighter on it. And I'm like, no, why don't you use a single torch and like,
Yeah.
spend 30 seconds, spend 45 seconds. This is going to be your friend for the next hour plus. Like,
Mm-hmm.
the way my one of my early mentors called it. He said, very, very important in life in general. He goes, toasting a cigar, right? Lighting it up is foreplay. And then he added, do not rush foreplay.
No.
So there we go. So take it
Nope.
for what it is. Um, the other part is obviously when you did retrohale, you probably exhaled it quickly. And I always tell this
Yeah.
is the other piece whenever I'm teaching people how to do it slowly. Exhale it over 3 to 5 seconds, and you don't need to do all of it. You need to save 10 to 15%, I think is more than reasonable. So in this
Yeah.
situation, very small amount. And what you really want to do is you can retrocale it with food, with spirits, with wine, liquor. I don't think I've ever done it with soda, but you probably could. Just be careful of the bubbles.
Oh yeah.
Really, it's
Those will get you.
yeah. Your tasting center is going to be up here, so you'll pick
Hmm.
up what you're really doing. You're getting the flavor molecules or aromas right from here to
Hmm.
here, and you don't need a lot of them. right? You're not going to somehow magically taste more because, instead of 15%, you sent 20% up. That's
Right.
not going to happen. That's not how it works. Um, but obviously, you need enough to pick stuff up. You also develop with food, wine, spirits, doesn't matter, anything. You develop, I don't want to call it palate blindness, but it's palate satiety is the technical term, which essentially
Hmm.
means your palate gets bored. And this is very easy, and you kind of start feeling full.
Hmm.
Very easy way to pick it up. Um, if you don't believe me, grab, 4 or 5 pieces of white bread and try to just scarf it down. Now, that's going to be like pretty problematic, right? Because it's boring. It's relatively flat. Texture-wise, it's not super interesting. It's just, well, it depends.
Yeah.
If it's Costco's like cranberry and walnut, like, yeah, I can polish off like four pieces of that. But again, for most stuff, it's just going to be like just plain white bread. You're going to struggle to finish it because your palate essentially goes, this isn't really engaging. And your brain essentially says, yeah, like this is it. Like, I don't really want it. So the way to kind of keep it interesting, and cigars are the same way, right? At one point, you're going to keep recognizing these flavors that keep coming up, and they might fade away, or as the cigar progresses, they might change or fall in the background, and your palate and brain just say what's in there, what's more in there.
Right.
That doesn't mean that a relatively simple profile-wise cigar is going to be bad or good. It's just
Yeah.
it is what it is. Um,
Yeah.
So I tend to blend mine for complexity because I personally don't want to smoke like one-dimensional cigars. So that's kind of the idea. I do come up with a profile or idea or direction that I want to go before I set out. So it's not like I go to the factory and I'm like, oh, let me add a little bit of this and a little bit of that. No, there's a very clear, okay, I want to make a full flavor, creamy, delicious cedar oak vanilla, lots of roasted nuts, chocolate. Like this is what I want in my cigar, but it also needs to be light to medium. So if we're using a
Hmm.
scale to 5, I'm gonna say I don't want it past like 2.5 at most. Body wise, it's about I want it to be about in the same range. So what I really want to do is I want to get it a 5 on flavor, but two, maybe 2.5 on the body and strength. And body and strength are different things. I know you know
Yep.
this, but I kind of want to mention to anybody who's listening. Body is going to be the impact, the weight, if you will, of the tobacco or the
The
smoke rather on
the
your
depth
palate.
of it.
Yes, like think of it as easiest way whenever I explain wine, and I kind of feel this works the same way.
Hmm.
Think of it on a scale where 1 is going to be water, and then 5 is going to be, your half and half.
Yeah.
And then light to medium is going to be like your 1% milk, and then medium is going to be your 2%, and medium to full is going to be your, regular milk or 4%, right? It's going to be very, very easy. And then half and half is going to be your just palate coating, big, rich, like if it spills on a plate, you could cut it with a knife kind of thing. That's how I broadly explain it to people because most of us have had these
I
types
like
of
that.
things. We've mostly experienced this, right? And if we
Yeah.
say, or you can do like light to medium might be almond milk or alternative milks, right? So something that's going to be primarily water with a little bit of something. Um, how does Nick Offerman say it in Parks and Rec? Milk that's lying about that it's milk. So uh, yeah, just kind of idea from a texture standpoint, and then strength is just the actual impact of nicotine.
Hmm.
Um, it's important to know that you build tolerance over time.
Yeah.
So if you smoke, your full bodied, full strength cigars, meaning you smoke like a double Hero for breakfast, you are going to be first of all, very very happy for you. This is not something I could do. B, you're just going to have a much higher tolerance than someone who's like me smoking, or you, right? Because you're smoking the blanc, like you're smoking a relatively light cigar as an
Hmm.
early start to day. And it's funny because people will do their progressions, and most people will start with something light, but then I know people who start like super heavy in the morning and then kind of like pull back as they go.
Yeah.
No, I got a cool question. So when it comes to
Mm.
nightcap, Do you
Yeah.
prefer to end the note on like a heavy cigar or a light cigar?
Um,
And why?
to be honest, I kind of like something a little bit fuller before the day's end. My cigar smoking routine varies from day to day just because there will be sometimes weeks where I won't be able to even sit down and smoke one, and then there will be like weeks where I smoke upwards of like, a dozen cigars in a single week just because
You
it's a good
make up
week.
for it.
Well, you make up for it. And it's just like, and like that's in a week, not in a day. I'm not George frickin' Burns here, but yeah, I think the most cigars I've ever smoked in a single day is 9. And that was because I was like on a trip that was all about smoking cigars, not even like TPE, but like I was going somewhere where I was hanging out with a bunch of cigar smokers and, you know, lounge hopping. But,
Makes sense.
yeah, but, usually I will start off with something a little bit lighter in the beginning of the day just because there's a refreshing aspect of it where you're just like your palate's not quite awake yet. You've had breakfast, maybe you've had your coffee, maybe you haven't had anything, which I wouldn't recommend smoking on a fully empty stomach. I have done it before. It's doable, just depends on what you smoke. And but especially if you are a inexperienced or not as experienced cigar smoker, even some of the lighter cigars will knock you on your ass if you're not, if you don't have something in your stomach or you haven't had, something to kind of start out your day before the cigar. But at the end of the day, I go bold pretty much. It's like I have myself a nice Maduro, at the very least, like a nice, Habano or something like that, something a little bit on the stronger side, more depth of flavor, a little bit, more strength, just because a good strong cigar at the end of the day can send you off to sleep in a really good mood. There's just something about it. And then especially if you've had a big dinner, I think it's a really good idea to have a stronger, more bold cigar at the end after dinner, just because, it really adds to the experience and the depth of flavors you've already experienced. Let's say if you had a really nice steak dinner, I recommend having like a Maduro or something similar after a big dinner like that, just because it kind of complements some of the flavors you've already had between the salty and the sweet and things like that. But
Makes a lot of sense, especially when you said early on to, you know, typically don't do it on an empty stomach.
mhm,
Um, especially for, I mean, I know people who do it. I personally don't. I like to start my day off right and, eat something, get a little bit of food into my brain.
mhm,
Um, and then definitely on the heavy side, the nicotine, I have to look into it. I don't think maybe there are studies, I don't know, but definitely you feel the effects more if you haven't eaten.
mhm,
And also if you do experience, if you are a new smoker and you end up, trying a heavier cigar and you don't feel well, you might feel lightheaded or your stomach's upset or, you just don't feel well, have a little bit
yeah,
of soda. So while nicotine is an alkaloid, and when you experience, the technical term is like nicotine toxicity, right? Like
mhm,
nicotine poisoning, which no different than like when you're hungover, right? Like you're essentially
yeah,
experiencing alcohol toxicity, uh, after effects, right? So in order to counter this with nicotine is you just have a little bit of soda. And I do suggest doing soda rather than sugar or anything else for one simple reason. Millions upon tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars have gone into making soda as addictive as possible and just like very easy for your body to break down. So the moment you take a sip, it literally starts breaking, your body starts breaking it down immediately.
mhm,
You'll be good within probably less than a minute. And you don't need to
yeah,
drink a whole thing. Like you can take a sip, like take a drink and you should be okay. Counters it very quickly. You should be
mhm,
back to, normal. And then, you know, that's kind of the other portion of it, kind of like touch upon too. People are like, oh, how long should I enjoy it? How long should I smoke a cigar? What should I do with it? Like, do I smoke it out to the band? Like, do I remove the band? Whatever. And my answer is always the same. Like, as long as you enjoy it.
yeah,
And if that means, 3 puffs, which we all have friends that have done that.
I
right?
don't think I
Like
have any friends who do that, but I
I got a
digress.
lot of friends who have want to try cigars, or maybe we have barbecue or something, like they don't smoke cigar once a year. Um, I've had that happen. You also learn very quickly not to give them the LE stuff and the Davidoffs.
Oh, hell no. No.
2 days later.
Well, in case you don't notice, we're wearing different clothes. And that's because my silly self didn't hit record on the second half of our interview just a couple of days ago, hence the SpongeBob intermission thing. So but I'm back here with Vlad. And we are going to try and continue and pick up our conversation from where we were, which, the bummer is, I will say, and maybe we can touch at least on one of them. Vlada was telling me some really great stories from his time in hospitality. And I think the one that I found the funniest, if you want to kind of give the short version, is when there was this girl who was going through your champagne list, and she was just, apparently she knew a lot, but then when you served her champagne, something really weird, or at least from our perspective weird, happened. So why'd you like
For
try to
sure.
tell, yeah, the
So
shortened
the
version
the
of that?
short of it is, um, this person I talked to, this happened probably 70 years back.
Wow.
So this person ordered, you know, essentially wanted to talk to the wine director or some, so I come over there. We end up talking, and she goes, "Yeah, this is what I have in the family cellar." And right off the bat, she starts listing just about every great champagne in existence, and a lot of the things that you won't really see on the wine list, like someone who really knows the region and the blends. So she goes, "You know what would you suggest on the list?" And by the way, at the time, that list had about 3 or 4 pages, so probably about 80 to 100 different champagnes. So it's a pretty massive list.
Yeah.
Um, so she goes, "I've never had the RD, which is a Bollinger rare release that spends an extended time aging before release." Now, this particular one was a Brut Natura Zero Natura. I forget. This is years ago. What
Hmm.
essentially means there's no real sugar added, so the acidity levels are really, really high. So she goes, "Yeah, I'll grab that. That sounds really interesting. Let's try that." So as I'm about to walk away, I go, "You know what? Would you prefer to have it served in sparkling or burgundy glasses?" Now, it has been a trend of sorts. That question is essentially, are you really on the cutting edge? Because burgundy glasses are typically, while champagne flutes, right, the sparkling, the tall, skinny ones,
Yeah.
are revelry, right? You're having fun. We're celebrating something. It's really beautiful.
I see what you did
If
there.
you're, yeah, if yeah, dad jokes. If you really want to if you really want to appreciate the champagne the right way, not the right way, in a different setting, different way, you want to opt for burgundy glasses because those blends are primarily going to be two Pinots or a Chardonnay.
Hmm.
Anyway, long story short, she goes, "Oh, I'd prefer burgundy glasses," and I'm like, "Great! This person not only has extensive knowledge, but like really, is on the cutting edge." So as I'm walking away, she goes, "Could I grab an iced tea as well?" I'm like, "Sure." So I walk away, walk down to the cellar, grab the bottle back. Iced tea in the meantime arrived. She tries it, falls in love with it. She goes, "Oh, this is great." And then most people tend to drink champagne colder than it
Hmm.
really needs to be. You can
Yeah.
enjoy it much like white wine at the proper temperature rather than, ice freezing. So your teeth kind of um, become frozen solid as you're enjoying it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we pour a little bit, and I go, "Would you like me to keep it in the ice bucket or let it warm up a little?" She goes, "I'd actually prefer it warmed up." And I'm like, "Great." So I leave it on the table. As I'm walking away, she flags me. She goes, "Pardon me, could I get the sugar caddy?" I turn around, see that my server didn't bring it. I'm like, "Yeah, I'll grab it from the side station, bring it over." So I take another 7, maybe 8 steps, and I turn around and I see the lady taking the sweet and low, right? Like not even Splenda, puts it in the burgundy glass and just tops it off with that RD. And I just go to my other manager and I'm like, "Man, I need a minute. I need a second."
Oh
Because that
no.
was really which kind of brings us to a fun point afterwards, right? I kind of had to take a mental second there. Um, come on, man, you should have used Splenda. Like I haven't seen anybody really use Sweet and Low unless they're, Um,
Yeah.
getting close to that ninth digit, or sorry, ninth decade.
Oh man.
Anyway, so I kind of I laugh it off now, but I was kind of pretty shocked because it was we only had two bottles, so it was like this went to the right person, and then very quickly it was
Oh
turned
man.
to. But it brings us to such a cool the lesson there. Um, there's that long-standing line where the guest is always right. The full quote is the guest is always right in matters of taste, which
Mm-hmm.
she bought the bottle. She can do whatever you want with it,
Oh yeah.
including, pouring Splenda or not Splenda, Sweet and Low. She enjoyed it, so who am I to judge? Laughed it
Yeah.
off. That's a learning and humbling experience, especially when Psalms tend to be snobs. And I
Yeah.
got put in the place probably 10 plus years ago, where
Yeah.
essentially it was like, hey, people can enjoy what they want. You shouldn't, don't judge, just make sure they have the great experience. Very early in my career, we're like, hey, just make sure they have a great experience, whether it's you know, white Zin or RD Bollinger or a DRC or whatever. Our job is to just make them feel great and hospitable because you kind of can't stay in business by making people unhappy unless
Yeah.
you're in New York. So
But yeah, no, they take it to an art form in New York. I remember hearing a story about a guy. He wasn't native to New York, but he was visiting a friend. He went to a coffee shop, and when the guy's cup would be empty, he'd be like, "Hey, some more coffee." No, please, no, excuse me, just hey, get more coffee over here. And the guy who was visiting from California, a little bit too, polite and meek mannered, and he's like, excuse me, excuse me, excuse me. And then he finally says, "Hey, can I get some more coffee over here?" Just kind of like, the when in Rome situation. And the lady's like, "You shut up."
perfect.
Like
I go
she,
to that place tomorrow.
right?
That's
She
that's
just
the
knew.
setup.
It's like you're not from here, so shut up. I'll be there when I'm ready to get over there. So, yeah, no, it's kind of a funny situation, but like I think the way the analogy for it was like saying that'd be like getting a really great eggs Benedict and just dumping ketchup all over it, like as if the hollandaise sauce wasn't, good enough and all that kind of stuff. Just squirting a bottle of Heinz all over it. But again, like you said, if it's what the customer likes and they're paying for it, I mean, a brunch or breakfast is quite different than say like, a bottle of Bollinger, which, those are not cheap. And but again, she's paying for it. So it's just like, okay, I'll just go over to the side and cringe until I'm ready to come back out and she can just enjoy her abomination.
Oh
Uh,
man, at this point, I don't. I've through those experiences, I've just gotten over. There's no cringing. It's just, yeah, I was shocked a little bit, but like, we just kept rolling with it, and it was great. It really people enjoy what they like, and if they want to smother it
yeah.
in ketchup, great. I mean, anything else is uh gatekeeping, being judgmental. I'm genuinely happy as long as I'm
Yeah.
happy for the other person to enjoy the way they enjoy. To bring it back
Yeah.
to cigars, we did an event and it still makes me laugh, but they had an incredible experience and
Yeah.
I actually love the whole situation. So I did this event in Philly and this group of ladies walks in and one of them was somewhat experienced from what I could tell because she was like, "Yeah, I enjoy these particular brands."
Mhm.
And then the other three were, probably keeping her company. Maybe it's their first cigar or one of the first cigars. And I offer, right, like no different than anybody else. And I'm like, what do you like? Let me find something that really works for you. So they end up taking this Bellicoso and I offered to cut it and light it, prepare again, no different than anybody else. Um, one of the ladies goes, "Nope, I got it." I'm like, all right. I walk away, turn around, just to make sure that everything's all right. So I see the lady reverse the cigar, cut the head of the cigar, right, rather than the foot, and smoke it from the foot. And I'm like, all right, do I like what's the move here? Do I go over and I'm like, hey, is everything okay? Like you're smoking it the wrong way, which again, if you're a guest, that's especially if you're teaching someone, right? This is a
Mhm.
just a shitty experience overall, right? Who am I to tell you, hey, you're enjoying this wrong? So I ruminate on it for about 30 seconds and I'm like, I know what I'm gonna do.
I walk over and I'm like, hey, how's everything? How's, was the cigar the right choice? Like, did you enjoy everything? She's like, I love the cigar, really beautiful. I love the open draw. And I'm like, you know what? Great. Can I offer you any, would you care for water? Do you want, we have booze, like whatever. Do you want a coffee? Like we can make it for you. She's like, no, we're great. Like we're just having a great time. And true to her, her enjoyment was so great that they ended up buying an extra 10 cigars between the four of them. Um, we never brought up that maybe we should smoke it the other way. But yeah, they had a great time. So
Oh man.
that's great. That's really,
No,
really, I'm happy for them. That's it. Can't really say.
no. You can't argue with that. No, but just to kind of as a bit of a contrast to the actual like extreme side of it. Like there was a guy I used to know, his name was Scott, and he was somebody I followed on socials, and he doesn't have much of a presence on social media anymore. But he would do like little mini cigar reviews in his story and stuff like that. Really funny guy, really, um he's a biker covered in tattoos, really funny, really great guy. And he was telling a story, which as he told the story, I got more and more horrified because there was a buddy of his, and I think it was like one of the bigger name cigar brands or something like an Arturo Fuente or something. What the guy would do is he would, he'd start to smoke the cigar. He did the usual stuff and he'd start smoking it. And then if he needed, he wanted to take a pause, like he wanted to enjoy it a little bit more later, he would take the cigar, ash and all, and put it in this box and leave it. And then he would come back to it later, smoke it a little bit more, tap the ash into the box, put the cigar back in the box, enjoy it later, maybe even like a day later. And it was just like, I was kind of a novice at the time, but I was just like, that is just gross to me because that cigar's flavor is going to get completely muddled and just messed with by sitting in a box with ash. Because, like you hear people say, like, there are certain cigars you probably don't want to have in the same humidor. Like, especially if they're flavored or infused, you don't want to have them with your other cigars if you don't want to affect the original flavor of the other cigars. And it was just like, it just sounded so gross to me because by the time he was finished with it, and it wasn't even that big of a cigar, I think he enjoyed it over like a couple of days. And he just kept throwing it back into the box with the ash and all. And I was just like, I'm sorry, I was grossed out by that. It was just such a weird thing. Like, I mean, we know you don't do that. You shouldn't do that. But then again, kind of like you were saying, I'm not even a sommelier and I'm a little bit snobby when it comes to that. It's just like, no, there's a proper way to enjoy cigars. You don't do that. And it's like you have to fight the urge to school the person because they're probably not going to appreciate it for one, you know, unless they're genuinely curious and ask us like, oh, how should I smoke this? Should I put it here? Should I do it? It's like, no, don't ever do that. Because I've heard of people who like smoked half a cigar and then put it back in their humidor. That's just not a good idea
Hey
at
man, maybe
all.
we're all sleeping on this. Maybe that's the right move, you know? Um,
I dare
you
you to
know,
try it. I
cig
dare you to try it.
cigars are uh hydrophilic, so they'll suck moisture out both from
Mm-hmm.
surrounding, or they're trying to equalize. I was gonna say
Yeah.
gain equivalence, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Ultimately, that also means that they'll pull the aromatic molecules, right? Whatever's
Yeah.
floating. So, you want to make your own infusion, put a cigar next to your sauerkraut, preferably in the fridge. Like it's gonna, be very unique. But again, maybe we're all sleeping on it. That being said, if someone really truly does want to enjoy a cigar later, I personally don't do that just because I try to gauge how much time I have between whatever I'm doing, and then cigar
Mm-hmm.
is always I treat it as it's a treat. It truly is a treat rather than
Yeah.
doing what I'm doing. So I try to make it a point to enjoy it in the given time frame, right? So your
Right.
Robusto should be 45 to 60 minutes. Your Toro is textbook. I'm saying what the textbooks say, right? Like your
Yeah.
Toro is going to be 60 to 75. But then again, if I'm taking it slowly, really paying attention, like I'll easily get 20% more. So my Toro might last an hour and a half. The
Yeah.
BDX Blanc, for example, which is 6.5 by 54, like I've gotten 2.5 hours out of it. Just very like slowly, meticulously, smoking it. Then again, I've also chiefed through Corona Gorda in like 40 minutes. It happens.
Yeah.
Assuming it's all properly packed and everything, you should get 45 to 60 minutes, just like Robusto. But again, if you do want to save it for later, my experience is, and I, you guys have certainly encountered this in the lounge, especially if someone's like, hey, I want to save this for later, or, you want to revisit it, rather than let it sit and marinate in whatever was affected by the flames and the fire.
Yeah.
Cut it, quarter of an inch, half an inch, even up to an inch. You'll know when it's ready, depending on how much you've heated it. You can literally cut off that much, look at it, and if it's brown or dark, like you can see that it's been affected by fire, just cut that piece off and relight it. I wouldn't put it in a humidor, but that's just me. I've never done it. Again, maybe the guy figured out something that the entire industry is sleeping on. So,
I mean, yeah, at best, like throw it in a bag with a humidor pack, so that way it's kind of set aside and by itself, and that way it doesn't
and then
affect
you put the
the.
humidor pack in the humidor again. If it's
I,
cross-pollination, cross-contamination.
yeah, if you want to do an experiment, see what happens. I mean, like you said, we may be sleeping on something. I'm not, 100% confident that it's going to be a successful or even good experiment. But I mean, people have asked me questions at time like this, like, "Hey, do you dip your cigar in like cognac?" I'm like, "Well, I don't have any cognac, so no," and all that kind of stuff. And people are like, I've heard of people like, dipping their cigars in tequila and whatnot, and it's just like, if you want to try it, by all means. It's one of those things where like, try it. Tell me what happens, because I'm not going to be the guinea pig. I'm not going to be the one who tries it and possibly like gets upset that I like wasted a decent cigar by dipping it in something or whatnot. But yeah, I mean, why not just experiment, see what happens, and tell us the results. It could be fascinating, it could be entertaining, it
Right.
could be sad.
You're right. I haven't dipped any of my cigars in anything just because I've seen people do it, and the one scene that always comes back to my mind is if you watch The Office for the dinner episode, where Michael takes a steak and dumps it into puts it into the wine glass and takes it out, and I'm like, I always get that reminder. Um,
Jesus.
like, again, I'm not judging as long as they enjoy it. Like, who cares? The story behind Churchill and dipping his cigars into cognac is, I mean, Churchill was an alcoholic. Like, they've actually done a legitimate study, and there's people that have, I think they actually christened it the Churchill gene, where
Mhm.
essentially your optimal working temperature is, 2 drinks, 3 drinks. And then again, he wouldn't sit down and like polish off a whole bottle to get his day going. Like, he'd
Right.
essentially just top up throughout the day. Now, I'm not advocating for that, but just, read a really, really good book on him by Andrew Roberts. So he's the guy who did Napoleon's autobiography.
Mhm.
And the book's phenomenal. The book is probably like 1,000 pages. You could beat goats to death. You can use it for, home defense. Um, it's really good. And one of the things, like, they touch upon him essentially just drinking all day, every day for
Oh
the whole
gosh,
war.
that's nuts.
Um, but again, it worked for him, so who are we to judge?
Well,
But
like, I think Queen Elizabeth, God rest her. I think she had like 5 cocktails a day. Like, I mean, it kind of helps when you're royalty and you have like access to top shelf stuff on a regular basis. But yeah, I guess she had up to the very end, she had like a few cocktails a day. And, granted, the monarch being a monarch in the United Kingdom is far different than being, prime minister, because I feel like the monarchy is more of a tradition. And yeah, they do have their hands in affairs of state. But when it comes to, yeah, she kind of had that luxury of being able to enjoy several cocktails a day and have it not necessarily affect her daily routine or how she conducted herself.
hey, man, what's classy when you're rich and trashy when you're poor? Day drinking.
you know, yeah, when you have the means and the resources to enjoy it on, a very a regular basis, yeah, it seems refined, it seems classy. But yeah, when those of us, lay people who are just, every day trying to make their living and whatnot, we drink during the day, yeah, we get judged for it. It's kind of a funny juxtaposition. just because it's like day drinking is day drinking. It doesn't matter if you have the time and the money, and you can do it as often as you want. But yeah, no, it's just kind of funny to me, the different contrast, like as you put it. But yeah, no, when it comes to um cigars and alcohol, there's a fair amount of inter interchangeability because of the fact that a good wine is similar to a good cigar as long as it's properly aged and stuff like that. You have cheap wines, you have cheap cigars, stuff that's more affordable for everyday people. It
And
just
it's fun.
depends.
Sorry, just on that, just interject the cheap wine versus super high end wine.
Hmm.
Um, Similar to cigars, right? There's like price is what you pay, value is what you get. And I'll stay to wine so I don't ruffle any feathers and say, why does X cigar cost Y?
Yeah.
While this is better for whatever, under quotes and costs Y again, right?
Hmm.
So, uh, I about close to 15 years now.
Yeah.
I listened to this assistant winemaker at a First Grove Bordeaux, right? We're talking about bottles that go for, $600 to $800, like on the low end, and what he essentially dropped is, hey, we have like handpicked crew that handpicks the grapes, right? Can you imagine the amount of labor to like check each grape? Um, we have optical sorters at the time, which was like, using spaceship technology for agriculture, essentially, right?
Hmm.
So it'll go for the first pass of selection where we say, okay, this is ready. Then we'll put it in a belt and it'll get scanned by a computer. I'm sure there's someone selling like optical sorter AI to wineries right now.
Yeah.
Um, but like it'll essentially say, hey, is this at the right level of ripeness? Does it have enough bricks, which is, sugar or potential alcohol, things like that, right? Like it'll check it for all of these parameters that it need to be. Then it ends up in this, beautiful bottle that like doesn't really remind of anything else because it's custom made, similar to how they do like high-end perfumes. It has a long cork that's specifically sourced from this like one particular supplier. It's stamped, like the labels might be done by a famous artist, blah, 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 right? All these things. And he goes, even if with everything that we do, that bottle can't cost more than 25 euros, which is $30, give or take,
Yeah.
um, to make everything. And he just drops it. Everything else is marketing. That being said, is that doesn't mean like don't spend more than $25 on a bottle of wine, because that's silly. Like you're limiting yourself. There are incredible wines that have the ability, much like cigars, to take you by the hand and say, hey, let me take you on this little trip, right? You can travel without moving, um, and just go, hey, this is where I grow. This is the region where I grow. These are the effects of this particular year. You're drinking bottle time, however you cut it. And cigars are much the same way, right? Cigars are a living fossil, much like wine. So, provided you've done everything from, I was going to say vineyard to bottle, but provided you did everything from a plantation, and again, most of us brand owners, whether it's small, medium, boutique, a lot of us are removed from the day to day. Like I don't know how to farm tobacco. Like I don't even know how to farm grapes. Like, but I know how the process works. I understand it. Um, Provided you've taken all the appropriate steps, you've nurtured it along the way, you've aged it for the proper amount of time, and then you blended it, and then it was actually made. Essentially, you didn't make a mistake throughout the process. Um, it should be a reflection of what you wanted it to be. So with my blends in particular, I've each of them, yeah, every cigar has a story, but like each of them has a very specific idea behind the blend. The BDX, the Bordeaux, the San Andreas one, is really there to highlight the Honduran broadleaf. And at this point, I think it might be one of the two cigars now left on the market, because the other companies that use them have essentially, discontinued those SKUs. The problem is it is so different and unique. And how do you really introduce something that's really different and unique? You make it similar but different.
Hmm.
And then it just worked out that, the San Andreas and Viso Jalapa complement that Honduran broadleaf so well. Right, when we say broadleaf, my head always goes to Connecticut with its, meaty, earthy, big, rich, very, very much. And again, different farming techniques, different soils, different approaches to blending, all of these things impact it. On the flip side, Honduran broadleaf is just this beautiful, bourbon mash cereal grains. Pardon me. It actually has something that not a lot of cigars have, which is plums and raisins. It really does taste, you get that innate sweetness that just flows throughout it.
And I love that. That's a profile that I really enjoy in cigars.
And you don't really find that often. So the choice there is, do I make this tobacco when I tried it, right? Do I make it the star of the show? And I'm like, yeah, I want to make this tobacco is going to be Beyonce, not a backup dancer. Like, it's going to be about that. And no size highlights it better than the 6x60. So the 6x60 has an extra leaf in there, an extra amount of Honduran broadleaf, and it really just like ramps it up to 11 as to how clear it is. And while there were 3 cigars on the market that used it, if you actually tried it, you could pick it out of you just zero and be like, yes, this is it. This is Honduran broadleaf. Like, I know what it tastes. I don't know if that was the philosophy behind the other 2 blends, because, right, one of them has Connecticut broadleaf as a core part of the blend. So I don't know if that is the case. Is it more a backup dancer to kind of, create a symphony, or is it really the star of the show that's just like driving the whole thing?
Right.
With the BDX Blanc, right, I wanted to make an incredibly complex light to medium cigar, which I think is pretty difficult to eke out every ounce of complexity you can while keeping it approachable for someone who's never smoked a cigar. Like, I've really made a cigar for someone who's never smoked a cigar, but also someone who's an extremely experienced smoker, and anyone in between. Because if you've never smoked a cigar, this cigar is going to be incredibly approachable, easy to enjoy, very clear, very clean profiles because of the aged tobacco, because of its flavor profile that is definitely full. But on the flip side, and I think we talked about in the earlier segment, the difference between body and strength, right? Body is just going to be the impact. Strength is just going to be the actual nicotine content that hits you, and then you build tolerance over time.
Right.
And Rioja highlights 2 of my big loves, which is Corojo from the Dominican Republic, very polarizing tobacco. You either love it or you hate it. So I've made a Corojo for people who might not like Corojo, or might not even, just like the profile. I've made that and then highlighted with another tobacco that I won't disclose because I was asked not to. It is planted in like less than 1% of plantings, very rare, very well aged. There's like only a couple of farms that grow it. So really, 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 those 2 things are the star of the show. And then the Mexican Sumatra undergoes a special treatment as well. So that underlying sweetness just flows throughout. And so those are like the 3 blends. And then that kind of brings me to what I'm smoking now. I'm actually happy that, we have technical difficulties because I can now play around with this. So I've been playing around. I've bought a small amount of 14-year-old wrapper. There's not a lot. There's maybe 2 bales, give or take 3,000 cigars after everything. However, the problem with that is once you go for the wrapper, not everything is going to be wrapper grade. Not everything is going to be pretty. So some of the stuff might get downgraded to binder. Some of the stuff might not be usable for binder at all. Might end up as filler. So I sat and ruminated on like, how do I actually use this? Because it's incredible. It's incredibly complex. It's amazing and great. And like, what would be the equivalent in the wine world to kind of keep it with the theme, and like, how is it going to work? And people like, came to me in a dream. It didn't. It came to me yesterday. We were playing poker in the cigar lounge. I sat down and as I smoked through these samples that are now ready, this was rolled 6 months ago. So I've tried them in all different stages. So I'll try it as soon as it's rolled. I'll try it after like a month, after 2 months, after 3 months, after 4 months, after 5 months, and ultimately after 6 months. And it just hit 6 months about 3 weeks ago. So it was just right. There's, I just called them blend 1, 2, 3, but for the actual launch of the cigars, the blends are going to be essentially the same. Where I can use the wrapper, that's going to be called Syrah. And the branding, I already have kind of the branding, but I'm going to work on it, because I came up with it yesterday. That's going to pay homage to Hermitage, which is a region in Northern Rhone in France, very famous for Syrah. Then the second one is going to be Shiraz. Shiraz being the Australian or New World way of calling Syrah. Obviously, different profiles than they do it in Europe. That's going to be slightly different profile, and that's the one that's going to use the binder. And then the third one is going to be Chateauneuf de Pape, or CDP for short, which is really right. That's blend. That's your GSM blend, your Grenache, Syrah, Mourvèdre primarily. Then you can add some 13 other varietals, but really those are the ideas, and that's where it ends up in the filler. So you have Syrah as the wrapper. The binder is going to be with called Shiraz, and then CDP where it's a blending component. And if you think about it, it goes, I might switch them around, but that's at least the idea right now. So I got the branding idea as well. We're definitely going to 3D print them and make them small. And I really want to use all of that 14-year-old wrapper because it's amazing. I don't want to, it looks a little rough because it is 14-year-old. It's not like super glistening and shiny, but it's incredible. Absolutely incredible.
No, I mean, I love a cigar that has like kind of a toothy look on the outside. Honestly, some of them can be just absolutely amazing. I wanted to ask a question that's kind of been, brewing in my brain is becoming a sommelier. Now, obviously, there are some people who have like a natural, ability to kind of, they have a palate that can just detect anything. And I guess the question is, can anybody be a sommelier with like the right amount of training and the right amount of just experience? Is that something that anybody, if they ever wanted to, is that something that anybody can do?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. It's a muscle.
Hmm.
As long as you don't have any, I guess physical elements would be a proper, right? Like as long as you can pick up flavors, you don't have any issues with picking up textures and things like that. Yeah, anybody can do it. And even if you do, you could probably still do a good job if you get the theory and figure it out. The important part is it's a certification, and you can work. I know plenty of somms that have never gotten certifications that are absolutely phenomenal. Someone who's just had, they've been involved with wines for 10, 15, 20 years, 30 years, right? Like they know probably more than any certified somm who just passed his exam or, is like 2 years in, 3 years in, whatever.
Yeah.
They're going to know a lot more. Someone who no different than, if you do the cigar sommelier course, does it give you the way to look at those certifications has always been, this is you're certified and you meet whatever criteria they've set out for your level of knowledge. At that level, it might be intro, might be certified, whatever, but you've reached that threshold. Now you can get there and just stop. That's where you kind of plateaued and you perched and you're comfortable, or you keep learning. And the more and experiencing, the more you learn and experience, the better you will be ultimately. It's just no different than anything else. The more it's like going to the gym. The more consistently you practice, the better you're going to be long term at everything, right? Don't skip leg day because otherwise your legs are going to be, less developed in your arms, etc.
That's awesome. And sommeliers kind of have like the experience in obviously in hospitality and stuff like that. They're the ones that people call when they want to get a good wine or to work on the menu and stuff like that. And I've always found that really fascinating. So I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say is if you have ever had aspirations or dreams of like trying to become a sommelier, whether it's with cigars, wine, beer, food, or anything like that, it's never too late. It's definitely never too late to give it a try and see how far you can take that experience and that knowledge. Me personally, I mean, it's always been something that has fascinated me, but I'm experiencing it a little bit, with cigars in that over the last 7 years, I have been developing my palate to the point where I actually know what I'm talking about when I'm addressing a certain topic revolving around cigars. Wines, not so much, beers a little bit, whiskey's getting, a lot more experience there. But yeah, no, I would say if you want to have an all-encompassing experience with this sort of stuff, you want to make sure that you are acquiring the right knowledge to develop your palate. And that way it's just going to enrich your experience even more. I highly recommend doing that, even if it's on just kind of a extracurricular or hobby level, because it can take you to some really fun and awesome places with your experience. So, but I appreciate you sharing your knowledge, man, and telling us all about how these things are developed with your cigars and your experience with all of that, because that it's pretty essential to having the great experience, and definitely developing your own blend and your own cigars, because that's an art. It is definitely an art, and it takes a lot of time, experience, and trial and error to find what the right blend is. So
Oh
appreciate
yeah,
you sharing all that, man.
yeah, absolutely. It was a pleasure, and yeah, I mean, don't definitely just it enriches your experience, getting the understanding. You'll get to a point. Um, you mentioned beer and stuff like that. I did the beer certification, but like 10 years ago. I know the profiles, the styles. I just don't care. Like it doesn't. Like I literally don't care. Yes, I love a good stout, but am I going to chase something and go like, oh, this is, boysenberry double imperial stout that was aged in bourbon. Like, I don't care. Like, give me a Modelo Especial. I'm good. I like a Viennese lager. I can get it anywhere. It's, $10 or whatever it is, and it's great. I love it. Oh, cool. I want a slightly different experience. Great. I'll grab a Negro Modelo. Like, it works. I have a very I have a very consumer driven approach to beer where I'll essentially go, I enjoy this. I don't particularly care about venturing and exploring all of this. IPA has been such a dominant style for probably like a decade now, where it just exploded. Everybody was making IPAs. It's, different variations, trying to get on the IBUs, right, making them bitter. And while I enjoy a nice IPA, I don't enjoy, double IPA, quad IPA, where it's like just bitterness, bitterness, bitterness. I think it lacks complexity. I'd much rather have a red ale, or I'd
Yeah.
like a porter, or a stout, or you know what? I like simplicity and elegance. Like I'll absolutely crush a lager, which brings me back to, Modelo. Modelo is a classic Viennese lager. It's just approachable. It's clean. It's good beer making, just like clean. And for you to make, I remember talking to this um, very very different style of brewer, right? So they do wild ales, which is super interesting. Wild ales are essentially, for those of you who are not familiar with them, they use yeast similar to the way they'll typically get bottled in wine bottles as well. They'll use yeast. They can use actual lab yeast, or they can use ambient yeast, and they've made some really really phenomenal stuff. Now the downside, under quotes, is that the acidity is pretty high. So they're really food friendly beers. But will I crack open a 750 of that to kind of drink on a hot summer's day? Probably not, because
Nope.
it's gonna strip the enamel off my teeth. Um, but like it's probably one of the most food friendly beverages I've ever had. And I talked to him and I'm like, hey, like, what do we admire people in the cigar or wine industry. Like, what do you find fascinating? And he goes, I find, massive brewery that I won't mention because they've got enough. They don't need the help. But he's like, I'm impressed by a massive brewery being able to pump out 1 million cans a day consistently.
Mhm.
Like that is some next level science, consistency, just incredible skill set. Um, and I'll bring it up. I can bring this to the bourbon world, right? I like one of the Elijah Craig single barrels or barrel proofs. That's 100. I think it's Elijah Craig at least. It's like 116, and
Ooh.
you can just drink it neat. Like it should scorch your nostrils, burn any nose hairs, just be really good. And you know what? It's one of the most elegant, just like properly balanced. And for you to balance up, essentially almost 60% uh proof, 60% alcohol, right? Spirit is just incredible. And again, you don't need water, you don't need to do any of this. So it's just incredible to me. Um, it's just a very long-winded way of saying certifications are fun, they're good to go, but ultimately you make a choice between, do I want to learn more? Do I want to really dive into it? Or do you just want to get a better understanding? For beer, for me, it was interesting to get a better understanding, the different styles, the way they work with the beverage programs I ran, rather than offer, because it is an all-encompassing experience. When you come in, if I have, five massive breweries that I didn't want to think about because, that's what I have for my distributors and they're offering me good Habibi deals on the back end, like,
Hmm.
great. Like I'm making a ton of money for the property. Like I don't need to worry about, we're going to do a draft of whatever beer. Or instead, I can go and search out and be like, hey, I have this one porter that's really phenomenal. Like I have this two types of IPA, one that's a crowd pleaser and one that's like a very, very distinct style. I have a wheat that's not going to be something that nobody really thought about and is just popular because, that's kind of what it is. I want someone who really, specializes in the style. Like, do I want a framboise? Do I want whatever? Like, I wanted to do that. I wanted to enhance the guest experience. That's why I really wanted to dive into it.
Hmm.
But me as a consumer, like, I don't care. Not that I don't care. I'm comfortable where I'm at. Uh, I'll crush. My wife loves the Belching Beaver peanut butter stout.
I don't
Um,
think I've heard of that. That's
it's awesome. Like, I really wanted to hate on it, and I've had it in. I think that's where it really started because I had it in a restaurant and I was just like, it was one of our top selling beers, just likable, phenomenal. My wife loves it. And I'm like, you know what? I'll buy it. And I like drinking it too because it's fun. You get a little
yeah.
bit of peanut butter. It's a stout. It's a style I enjoy. It goes great with a cigar. Is it the best? Is it the best example of what a stout can be? God, no. Is it absolutely delicious? 100%.
It's one of those products that has no business being as good as it is, you know.
It's a good product. I don't
Yeah.
want to denigrate it in a sense that like it's not good. No, it's an exceptionally well done product. I'm happy for them because they decided to make something. And I remember when it was, considered crafty and boutique and small, but like I can now find it in, I think, Target,
Oh wow.
right?
That's I'm
So
gonna have
that's
to look for it then.
like Target, Vons, whatever, like your local, wine shop, beer shop, whatever, liquor store, right? You can find it. It's not something you got to stand in line and, only available on a Tuesday between 4 and 4:17. If it falls on the 12th of the calendar month.
Hmm.
But, it's not that. It's just like easily accessible, which is great. Provides a great experience.
No, and that's what it's all about is having a great experience because kind of like you're saying, just it doesn't have to be this top shelf, top notch, bougie type of stuff in order to have an incredible experience. And when I say incredible experience, I'm not talking about getting like plastered on wine or beer. I'm talking about like truly enjoying the flavor, truly enjoying how it makes you feel and things like that, and there's a lot of hidden gems out there, both when it comes to beer, wine, cigars, things like that. And it's the fun part. The really fun part is getting to explore all of it.
Exactly.
And it's gonna take you a while to really, because I was just on a podcast with a buddy of mine who has his own like mobile cigar lounge that he'll drive around and do events and parties and things like that. And he's saying like the same thing that I say to myself all the time is just that there's so many cigars out there to try. And I would argue too many because there's so many that I want to try. There's so many I see that people smoking. I'm like, I got to try that. I need to get my hands on that and stuff like that. And it's got to be something that you invest in, really. I mean, even if it's only like here and there, but it is definitely an exploration and a journey and something you want to take your time with. Don't rush it. Don't try to just, jump from one to the other, but really take your time with it. Otherwise, you're not going to get a good experience because, looking back to when I was just smoking cigars semi regularly and how much I smoke them now, I didn't know anything about what I was smoking. I just wanted to smoke cigars. I didn't care about the flavor. I didn't care about what was in it. I didn't care about any of that. I didn't really pay attention to it. And it wasn't until I started doing cigar media that I actually realized I had to pay attention and actually notice what I was experiencing. And when I did, it was a game changer. It was a complete game changer. And it allowed me to really delve deep into all this kind of stuff, and whether or not you're a sommelier or you have a, super refined palate, it is just all about diving deep into it and experiencing and continuing to experience and not limiting yourself to just one thing, one brand, one particular wine, particular beer. Just I don't like limits. I don't like limitations with that, because then I'm missing out. I'm missing out on something new, something different, something that I could really truly sink my teeth into and enjoy. So, and it sounds like you yourself have been, it's been a lifelong journey for you. It has been something that you have been, I mean, pursuing and experiencing, and you've made a living from it. And that's pretty incredible from my vantage point. It's taking those skills and putting them to good use, and making sure other people have a top-notch experience, regardless of what they like. Even if you hear their choice and you're like, you sure you want that? But then you remove your prejudice from it completely. You're just like, okay, man, I'll get that for you, and I hope you enjoy it. And that's really all there is to it.
Oh, yeah, you hit the nail on the head. I keep preaching this, where I'm like, hey, you shouldn't limit yourself. There's a vast world of beverages, cigars, coffee, whatever, and limiting yours. Well, yeah, it's comfortable to stay in one spot, but variety is the spice of life. So yes, well, I would love to have someone just smokes my cigars. I don't think that's realistic. I'd rather have you put in a rotation and
Mm-hmm.
explore what's around you and say, you know what, for X, I can have an experience that way over delivers, which is what I try to do with my cigars. Or you can have a different experience, maybe in the same price point, maybe more expensive, maybe less expensive. And just, have a fine-tuned experience to how you're feeling that day, because that's amazing. The they did that experiment, right, where people enjoy more expensive wines, and even though it's the same wine, they just put it in a heavier bottle. People have built billion-dollar brands because things are heavy, and that somehow signifies quality and luxury.
Yeah, the weight.
There's like, $1.7 worth of electronics in there. But ultimately, I mean, don't limit yourself. That's similar to people saying, I only drink red. It's great, right? But you also cut yourself off from like 5 different styles. Like, you can have sparkling, you can have dessert, you can have white wine, you can have rosé. You owe it to yourself. That's really it.
Absolutely. And I think that is a perfect note to end the podcast on. Definitely don't limit yourself and explore what's out there, and embrace the experience is really what it's all about. So, Vlad, I really appreciate you jumping on, despite all the technical difficulties and all of that kind of stuff. And
Speaking of technical difficulties, I just realized I've been using my laptop mic rather than the proper one like you have. So
I can
the
hear you
audio,
loud and clear. I can hear you loud and clear.
if
So
the
don't
audio
even worry about
sucks, you guys, it's just an extra technical difficulty we can add on there.
that.
I just realized.
I cannot tell you the number of times I have started recording a video and realized that my mic input was not properly done, and I'm just recording through the computer. And while from my vantage point it sounds like shit, most of the time people don't care. So it's part and parcel for the whole thing. So it all turned out great, and I appreciate you joining me, man, all the way from Las Vegas, and even with the wind and all of that kind of stuff. I appreciate you jumping on with me one more time.
It's funny, you can't really tell that it is windy, but ever so often the ash is just gonna fall off. Not like, can't see my hair swaying in the wind. The tree is actually like, you can't see it, but the sides, it's actually like held in place because we do get like pretty high wind here.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's pretty windy. That's why it's like 85 degrees and I'm in a long sleeve shirt.
Yeah, protect yourself from the wind, okay, and whatever it kicks up, including
Exactly.
including your ash. I noticed that
I've dropped it like 4 times.
I say the
But
wind nailed you like a couple of times. I noticed, is like, yeah, that's why you should probably try and see if you can invest in like a little space like this, man. Because that way when you have company, you don't have to worry about the elements. You just come in and sit and enjoy. But
I enjoyed the elements, especially in like when it's January, everybody else is freezing. Meanwhile, it's like 60 degrees in Vegas, so I can barbecue on the patio.
same thing here with California, man.
Exactly.
California, it doesn't get that cold, and it's nice. So, well, thank you again, Vlada, for jumping on. Appreciate you again sharing all your knowledge and stuff like that. And it has been a pleasure. And hopefully we can have you back on again. Hopefully, maybe next time I'll have you in person. And
Oh
then
yeah, that'd be awesome.
we don't
Here,
have to.
I'll throw a little tidbit for anybody who listens for the whole thing. Reach out to Kyle and just mention the name of the Viennese lager. And you'll get a 5-pack and a lighter. How about that?
Sounds good, man. For sure. Well, guys, we hope you enjoyed this episode, and be sure to tune in. There's an episode out every week. I got a question for Vlada, which is a question I ask for all my guests. Who rules?
Or Revelers rule.
Absolutely. And if you're listening or watching, that means you too. So take care, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you next time.
Thanks for having me.